She came to Seoul to save a dying little girl and left with a daughter,
엄마.
a home, and the most feared man in Seoul calling her his wife.
I have had it for 8 months.
But they were wrong.
You can't buy your way out of this one, son.
Stay with me because this one breaks your heart in a different way than the first, and by the end, there's a letter, 26 years old, that changes everything you thought you knew about how Barbara ended up in that house. So tell me in the comments, is there love enough to beat this? Or are there some things bigger than even the most feared man in Seoul? And if this story already has you feeling some type of way and this is your first time seeing our channel, smash the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because we are dedicated to bringing you the hottest stories with the best twists and turns. Let's go. 6 months after a sunflower wedding in a garden that used to grow only grief, the Kang household had reached a state that Madame O described as controlled chaos, and that Barbara described as home. The gate was gone. The white funeral lilies were sunflowers in every room. The grand piano that nobody had ever played was now played badly and loudly by Ha-eun 3 times a week, because she had decided she wanted to learn, and nobody in this house said no to Ha-eun anymore, including Do-hyun, who had once made grown men cry with a look, and now sat at the piano bench at 7 a.m. helping his daughter find middle C. He was terrible at it. She was worse. Together they were a menace. Barbara had started recording them from the doorway. The house was different in all the ways that mattered, and the same in all the ways that didn't. The marble was still cold. The rooms were still enormous, but now there were drawings on the fridge. Ha-eun's, mostly, which meant mostly sons, and one very concerning portrait of Madame O that Madame O had immediately confiscated and secretly kept. There were Barbara's reading glasses on the kitchen counter, a half-finished crossword puzzle in the study, and a growing collection of bad American snacks that Grandma Carter had shipped over before she'd gotten on the plane herself. Ha-eun had taken a particular and deeply personal interest in Flamin' Hot Cheetos, which Madame O had tried once and declared a war crime, and which Do-hyun ate in secret and pretended not to. Kang Do-hyun, former most feared man in Seoul, eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos alone in his study at midnight. This was the man Barbara had married. She was very happy about it. The empire was gone. Or rather, it was being rebuilt into something that didn't require anyone to disappear. Do-hyun had spent the year after the warehouse working quietly, methodically, turning the machinery of fear into something that merely made money. Real estate, tech, a chain of restaurants that were, genuinely, extremely good. The men who'd bowed to him in dark corridors now worked in glass offices with standing desks. Some of them were disconcerted. Most of them were relieved. He still had the watch. He still had the way of going very still when he was thinking. He still had the eyes that weren't cold, that Barbara had read correctly on the very first day. Grief-worn and exhausted, and underneath it all, wanting. He just also now had a school calendar on his refrigerator, and a daughter who corrected his pronunciation, and a wife who beat him at crosswords and laughed about it. He was, Barbara thought, the happiest miserable person she had ever known. He didn't know how to be happy yet. The muscle hadn't been used in years, so it came out sideways, in the way he showed up at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right thing, in the way he remembered every small detail she mentioned once and never again, in the way he watched Ha-eun run, and his whole face did something complicated and good. She was teaching him. He was a very determined student. Ha-eun needed no teaching. Ha-eun had arrived at happiness the way she'd arrived at language, all at once, unstoppable, making up for lost time. She had recovered faster than any of the doctors had dared to predict, which the doctors attributed to the transplant, and which Barbara attributed to that too, but also to the sheer stubbornness of a 6-year-old who had decided she wasn't finished. She was back in school, a real school, with a uniform and a bag and a class of 20 children who had quickly understood that Ha-eun was not to be underestimated. She had already corrected 2 teachers. She had organized the class library. She had decided her best friend was a girl named So-yeon who was equally small and equally opinionated, and the 2 of them together were a force of nature that So-yeon's parents found alarming, and Barbara found delightful. Do-hyun had been called in for a parent-teacher meeting in October. Barbara had not been available. This was not entirely an accident. He had come home afterwards very quiet, in the way that meant he was processing something. "How was it?" Barbara asked from behind her crossword. "The teacher," Do-hyun said carefully, "is afraid of me. Most people are. The other parents are also afraid of me. Also accurate. Ha-eun," he said, sitting at the counter, told her homeroom teacher that the reading curriculum was, quote, Missing important perspectives. She had a list. She made the list at home. She asked me to look it over. Barbara put down the crossword. Did you look it over? It was a good list. And Barbara Carter, who did not think she could love this man more than she already did, discovered she was wrong. This was the ordinary miracle of their life. Not the big things, not the wedding or the transplant or the warehouse. The little things. Ha-eun's terrible piano, the midnight Cheetos, the parent-teacher meeting, Do-hyun learning, very slowly and very seriously, how to be soft, and Grandma Carter, who had been in Seoul for 3 weeks and still hadn't unpacked her suitcase. It was Denise who told Barbara. Denise, who had stayed. Of course she had stayed. She and Ha-eun had a bond now that could not be undone. And besides, Seoul agreed with her in ways Macon, Georgia had not. Denise, who had been quietly watching Grandma Carter for 3 weeks, with the clinical eye of a pediatric nurse who had learned to read the things people don't say. She pulled Barbara into the kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon, closed the door, and said, "Barbara, when did your grandmother last tell you about her health?" And Barbara's stomach dropped half an inch. Barbara had assumed Grandma Carter hadn't unpacked, because she was planning to go home soon. That was the logical explanation. The safe one. She went upstairs. The room they'd made for Grandma was the sunniest in the house. Barbara had insisted, and Do-hyun had moved his home office without a single complaint, which had made Madame O raise one eyebrow approximately 2 millimeters, which for Madame O was the equivalent of fainting from shock. The suitcase was on the bench at the foot of the bed. Still latched, still tagged from the airport. 3 weeks in Seoul, and it sat there like something Grandma Carter was keeping her options open about. Grandma was sitting by the window in the good chair, Bible open in her lap, looking out at the sunflower garden below, where Ha-eun was running circles around Madame O, who was attempting to prune something. She looked peaceful. She looked beautiful. She looked like what she was. 79 years of survived everything, soft and strong at the same time, the architecture of Barbara's entire sense of how a woman should move through the world. She also looked smaller than Barbara remembered. "Grandma," Barbara said, closing the door behind her. "When did you last talk to your doctor?" A pause, the kind that answered the question before the words did. "Baby, the suitcase isn't packed because you're leaving soon," Barbara said, and her voice was steady, because she had spent a long time in this house, learning how to say the hard things steady. "It's packed because you need it to be ready. In case." Grandma Carter closed the Bible, took off her reading glasses, set them on the chain. She looked at Barbara the way she'd looked at her all her life, like Barbara was simultaneously the greatest thing she'd ever done and the hardest thing she'd ever had to do. "I've had it for 8 months, she said quietly. "Stage 2, they said in February. Stage 3, they said in April. They caught it in the lymph nodes." Barbara sat down on the edge of the bed. "I've been doing treatment in Atlanta. Dr. Reeves. He's good." A pause. "I didn't tell you because you had that baby to think about, and you'd just gotten married. And Grandma, I didn't want you to come home," she said. And there it was. The thing under everything. "You came to Korea to save me, Barbara. You crossed an ocean and found your whole world. I wasn't going to take you away from it. Not for me." The sunflower garden was below them. Ha-eun was still running circles. Madame O had given up on pruning and was watching Ha-eun with the expression she used when she was trying not to smile. Barbara looked at her grandmother. "You should have told me," she said. "Day 1. I know. You don't get to make that choice for me. I know that too. I'm so angry at you." "I know, baby." Grandma reached out and took Barbara's hand. "I know." They sat there for a while, Barbara angry and afraid, and in love with this woman who had taught her everything, in the sunny room above the sunflower garden, with the suitcase still latched at the foot of the bed. Then Barbara stood up. "Unpack your suitcase," she said. "Barbara, unpack it, Grandma. You're not going anywhere. I need to go talk to my husband." Barbara stood there for a moment, listening to Ha-eun laughing in the garden below, and the soft hush of Seoul beyond the window. Grandma's suitcase was still latched at the foot of the bed. Barbara's hand tightened around the doorframe, because now she understood. The miracle wasn't that this house had finally learned how to feel like a home. It was that the one woman who built Barbara, the woman who taught her how to stay, how to pray, how to love people out loud, had been quietly fighting a war by herself for 8 months. And if Grandma Carter thought she was going to carry that alone, in this house, in this city, under Barbara's roof, she was wrong. Barbara turned toward the hallway. "I need to go talk to my husband," she said, and she went to find Kang Do-hyun. She found him in the study, on the phone, doing the quietly terrifying thing where he conducted international business, in a voice so calm it made the other party do all the work. He looked up when she came in, read her face, said something brief and final into the phone and hung up. "Tell me," he said. She told him. He listened the way he listened to everything, completely still, completely present, taking it in without interrupting or reassuring, or filling the silence prematurely. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "What is she taking? What's the treatment protocol?" Barbara blinked. She said, "Dr. Reeves in Atlanta. Get me the name of the medication, the dosage schedule, the oncologist's full name and the hospital." He was already reaching for his phone. "And her last 3 scan reports if she has them." "Do-hyun? She's not going back to Atlanta," he said simply, the way he said things that were already decided. "We have the space. We have the resources. And there are 3 specialists in Seoul who are doing work on lymphoma that Atlanta doesn't have access to yet. Dr. Reeves is good. I will find her better." Barbara stared at him. This man who had once told her that women who loved him ended up in the ground. This man who had sat at a kitchen table at 3 a.m. and said "me too" to the thing nobody in this house would say. This man who had worn a child's yellow sun into a room full of dangerous men and didn't wipe it off. "She'll say no," Barbara said. "I know." A pause. "She'll be wrong. She's 79 years old and she survived Jim Crow and 3 recessions and raising me. Do-hyun. She does not lose arguments." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of where one lived now. "Neither do I." And Kang Do-hyun, former most feared man in Seoul, began making calls to find the best lymphoma specialists on the continent. Grandma Carter said no. She said it politely, firmly, and with the full authority of a woman who had been saying no to things she didn't agree with for 79 years, and had no intention of stopping. "That is very kind," she told Do-hyun, at the kitchen table, over tea, with Ha-eun present, because Ha-eun was always present, and nobody had figured out how to change this. "But I have my doctor. I have my church. I have my life in Atlanta. I appreciate the offer." Do-hyun looked at her. "The specialists I'm speaking with have a 12% higher 5-year survival rate than the standard protocol." 12% is 12%, Grandma Carter said. "But my church sisters are praying for me, and that's 100%, and I'll take the prayer. The clinic I have in mind also has..." "Son," Grandma Carter said. She used the word deliberately, precisely, with full awareness of its weight. Do-hyun went very still. Ha-eun, on the counter eating an apple, stopped chewing. "Son," Grandma said again, softer, "I know what you're doing. And I know why. And I know it comes from a good place." She looked at him steadily. "But you cannot buy your way out of this one." Do-hyun was quiet. "You spent your empire finding Denise," Grandma said. "You tore down that gate. You took down Jang. You rebuilt this house from a museum into a home. You have been working very hard, for a very long time, to fix everything that ever went wrong." She reached across the table and put her hand over his, small and certain, the same gesture her granddaughter had made at a kitchen table 2 years ago. "You cannot fix this with specialists and 12%. This one you have to sit with." Do-hyun looked at her hand on his, looked up. "I understand that," he said. "I disagree." Grandma Carter almost smiled. "Barbara warned me you were stubborn." "Barbara is also stubborn. I don't know where she gets it from." The almost smile became a real one. Ha-eun, on the counter, decided this was the moment. "Halmoni," she said, using the Korean word for grandmother she'd decided applied to Grandma Carter too, because Ha-eun made these decisions herself, and nobody argued. "If you go home, Oma will be sad. Baby, you're Oma. And when Oma is sad," Ha-eun continued, with the relentless logical precision she had developed entirely herself, "Appa forgets how to smile again. It took him a really long time to learn. I don't want him to have to learn again." She bit her apple. "Also, I'll be sad. And the baby will be sad." A pause. A significant pause. "What baby?" Barbara said from the doorway, where she had appeared approximately 3 seconds earlier. Ha-eun looked at her, looked at Do-hyun, looked at the apple in her hand with the expression of someone reviewing their recent decisions. "What baby?" she said, in a tone that was not convincing. Barbara looked at Do-hyun. Do-hyun looked at Barbara. Grandma Carter looked between them and said nothing, because 79 years had given her an excellent sense of when to say nothing. "Ha-eun," Do-hyun said carefully. "What do you know?" "Nothing." She climbed off the counter. "I'm going to practice piano." She left at a speed that was not quite running. They heard the piano start immediately, badly, as if the music could retroactively cover what she'd said. Barbara and Do-hyun looked at each other across the kitchen. That was not, Barbara said slowly, how I planned to tell you. And Kang Do-hyun, who had held together a criminal empire, survived a betrayal and a warehouse, and 2 years of grief, who was arguably the most controlled human being in the city of Seoul, grabbed the counter behind him with both hands, and the expression that crossed his face was not controlled at all. It was pure, terrified and grateful and overwhelmed and completely, undisguisedly, human. How long? He managed. 8 weeks. I was going to tell you after I told Grandma. Except Ha-eun apparently. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and kissed her, right there, in front of Grandma Carter, who said well, in a tone that implied she was not surprised, and who then very tactfully found something to look at in the garden. The piano in the next room hit a wrong note, then stopped. Then Ha-eun's voice. Are they kissing? Ew. Hold on. Before we go any further, if your whole chest just did something, same. Drop a Ha-eun's in the comments if Ha-eun absolutely sent you with, the baby will be sad. Because she knew. She absolutely knew. Subscribe and hit the bell because we still have a grandmother with a secret, a standoff nobody wins, and a letter that's going to change how you see everything. Okay, back to Seoul. Ha-eun processed the information about the baby over approximately 6 hours and several negotiations. By noon, she had accepted it. By 2, she had opinions. By dinner, she had a list. First, she said, at the dinner table, completely serious, fork in hand, the name has to be good. Not just a name, a good name. I will help with this. Thank you, Barbara said gravely. Second, he cannot have my room. I know you might think he should have my room because it's the nicest, but that's my room. And also Kokomi is in that room, and Kokomi is not moving. We were not planning to move Kokomi, Do-hyun said. Third, Ha-eun set down her fork. I want to be the one who holds him first, after Oma, before Appa. Do-hyun considered this. That seems reasonable. Fourth, she picked up her fork. He has to think I'm the coolest person he knows. Ha-eun, Barbara said. He'll be a baby. He'll think everything is the coolest. Good. Then my work will be easy. She ate a piece of broccoli with great dignity. I've been practicing. I read to my stuffed animals. I'm very good at reading. Madame O, at the corner of the table where she had taken to eating with them because nobody had suggested she shouldn't and she had decided not to suggest it herself, said, she is, in fact, very good at reading. Ha-eun pointed at her. See? Even Madame O. Madame O did not confirm or deny having feelings about this. Grandma Carter, across the table, watched all of this with bright eyes and the look of a woman storing up something precious. After dinner, Do-hyun found her on the terrace. The one where he had kissed Barbara under stolen stars, and Ha-eun had ruined it perfectly. The specialists, he said. Hear me out. Grandma Carter sighed. Son, not to fix it, he said quietly. I understand I can't fix it. I understand there are things that cannot be fixed with money, or 12%, or anything I know how to do. He looked at the city the way he used to look at it when it was his. Not anymore, not like that. Now it was just a city, beautiful and distant, and belonging to itself. But there is a baby coming, and a little girl who negotiated for first-hold rights, and my wife, who left Atlanta because of you, who would give anything to have more time with you. He turned, not to fix it, just for more time. Give us more time. Grandma Carter looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the suitcase. She thought about Ha-eun's list. She thought about her granddaughter, in a cream wedding dress, with sunflowers everywhere, and tears on her face that were the good kind. Who are these specialists? She said, and Do-hyun told her. All of it. Every name, every study, every number, every option, with the same precision and focus with which he had once hunted down a bone marrow donor through a church phone tree. He had not been able to save his wife. He was going to fight like everything to save the woman who had raised the woman who had saved his daughter. Grandma Carter listened to all of it. Then she said, Do you go to church? Do-hyun blinked. No. Would you? A pause. For you? For you, she said. You've got a lot to be grateful for. It's good to have somewhere to say it. She looked at him steadily. I'll see your specialists, but on Sundays you go to church with me. That's the deal. Do-hyun Kang, former crime lord, a man who had once made entire industries bow to him with 3 quiet words, said, Deal. Grandma Carter held out her hand. He shook it. And, she added, you have to actually sing. None of this standing there not singing business. If you're in my church, you sing. Do-hyun's expression was briefly, genuinely, Spectacular. Deal, he said again. More quietly. Nobody had predicted this. In the history of unexpected friendships, this one was somewhere in the top 5. Madam O, 62, Korean, 31 years of running an empire's household with the precision of a Swiss watch and the warmth of a glacier. Grandma Carter, 79, Black, Southern Baptist, ran her block association for 20 years, made the best cornbread in 3 counties, and had an opinion about everything, including things that weren't her business. They were the same person in different packaging, and it made them furious with each other and helpless to stop talking. It started with the kitchen. Grandma Carter had decided she was going to cook, not because anyone asked, because this was what she did when she was in a home. She was making cornbread. Madam O came in and watched for exactly 45 seconds before she said, "That pan is wrong." "Excuse me?" Grandma Carter said, "You want a cast iron skillet, not that pan. Cast iron holds the heat correctly. The bottom will not crisp without it." Grandma Carter looked at her. "I have been making cornbread since before you were born, and I have been managing this kitchen since 1993. I will get you the correct pan." "The pan I have is fine." "It is not." They stared at each other. Madam O got the cast iron skillet. Grandma Carter used it. The cornbread was, she admitted privately and to no one, exceptional. In exchange, Grandma Carter watched Madam O fold the household linen and said, "You're doing the corners wrong." "I am doing the corners correctly," Madam O said. "This is the correct method. That is not how you do a hospital corner. This is not a hospital." "No, but the principle." They argued about it for 20 minutes. They each demonstrated their method. They reached an agreement that neither would later acknowledge had been an agreement. Ha-eun watched all of this with enormous satisfaction. "They're friends," she told Barbara. "They would both deny that," Barbara said. "Yes," Ha-eun said. "That's what makes it funny." What happened next Barbara witnessed from the hallway. It was a Thursday evening. The house was quiet. Ha-eun was asleep. Do-hyun was in the study. Barbara couldn't sleep and came downstairs for water. Madam O and Grandma Carter were at the kitchen table. Between them, a pot of tea and a deck of cards. Madam O was teaching Grandma Carter a Korean card game. Grandma Carter was complaining about the rules. Both of them were fully engaged. And then Grandma said something Barbara couldn't catch. And Madam O, the gatekeeper who had kept herself apart from everything for 31 years, the woman who had said please once and denied it forever, laughed. A real laugh. Small and rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in a long time, but real. Barbara went back upstairs without her water. She lay in the dark and thought about a house that used to be cold and was now warm, and a woman she loved who was sick and staying to fight, and a baby coming, and Ha-eun's list. She thought, Bloom anyway. She thought, we're doing it. We're actually doing it. Do-hyun's hand found hers in the dark without her saying anything. "Go to sleep," he said. "The baby keeps..." "I know. Go to sleep anyway." "How do you always know when I'm awake?" "You're breathing," he said simply. "It changes when you're thinking." She turned toward him in the dark. "Do-hyun, you should know that you are the best thing that has happened to me since Ha-eun called me Amma." A long quiet. "You should know," he said, "that the feeling is not close." The treatment started on a Monday. Do-hyun had arranged everything. The clinic, the specialists, the schedule, the translation services, the car. He had done it quietly and without fanfare, and without any expectation of gratitude, which was his way, and with an attention to detail that made the oncologist's assistant comment she had never had a family member so thoroughly prepared. Grandma Carter went to her first appointment with the new team on a Monday morning, accompanied by Barbara and Denise, and came home 4 hours later with a new treatment plan and a new doctor she'd called very thorough, which from Grandma Carter was the highest available praise. Do-hyun had a whiteboard in his study. He had put it there himself. A medical whiteboard, columns for dates and times and numbers, the headers in his neat controlled handwriting, treatment dates, medication times, the names of the markers they were watching. The same whiteboard, in function. A different wall, a different body, a different fight. Barbara stood in the doorway the first time she saw it. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said, not looking up. She stood there a moment. "Why a whiteboard? You could track it on your phone." He was quiet for a beat. Ha-eun used to look at the whiteboard in her room, he said, when she was well enough to read the numbers. She said once that it helped her feel like someone was keeping track, like the numbers mattered because someone was writing them down. He straightened the papers on his desk. "I want your grandmother to know someone is keeping track." Barbara stood there until she was sure she could speak without her voice doing anything inconvenient. Kang Do-hyun, she said. I love you. He finally looked up. And the thing on his face, not quite a smile but what a smile is made of, the raw material of it, was the face of a man who was still learning how to receive good things, still surprised by them, still grateful in a way he didn't quite have language for. I know, he said. You're supposed to say it back. I know that too. A pause. I love you, Barbara. Better. She went back to the kitchen. He went back to his papers. The whiteboard stayed on the wall. Ha-eun found her way to Grandma Carter the way she found her way to everything she wanted. Directly, without permission, and with complete confidence she was welcome. She knocked on the door of the sunny room after school on a Thursday, 2 weeks into the treatment, with Kokomi under her arm and a book in her hand, and the expression she wore when she'd been thinking about something important. Grandma Carter was in the good chair by the window. She looked tired. The treatment was doing that, doing the hard work of fighting, which cost something in the short term for what might be gained in the long. But she smiled when Ha-eun knocked, the full warm smile she kept for this girl who was also now her own granddaughter in every way that counted. Come in, baby. Ha-eun came in, sat on the edge of the bed, facing her, put Kokomi in her lap. She was quiet for a moment, which was unusual. Ha-eun was almost never quiet without reason. When she was quiet, it meant the thing she was thinking was important. Halmoni, she said. Are you scared? Grandma Carter looked at her. Yes, she said, because she did not lie to children about real things. Ha-eun nodded, looked down at Kokomi. Me too, she said. When I was sick, I was scared all the time, even when I didn't show it. She straightened Kokomi's one ear. I used to pretend I was going somewhere else instead of being scared. Somewhere with a lot of yellow, like a field. But then, she looked up. Then Oma came and talked to me, and she didn't ask me to be okay or tell me it was going to be fine. She just stayed, and when she stayed, the field in my head got smaller, because this place got better than the field. She looked at Grandma Carter with those enormous dark eyes that had once stared at a window for 2 years, and now stared at everything with the focused curiosity of a person making up for lost time. You're scared because you might go away, Ha-eun said. Not a question. And you don't want Oma to be sad. And you don't want to leave the baby before you meet him. A pause. That's a lot to be scared of at the same time. It is, Grandma Carter said quietly. Ha-eun got up from the bed, walked to the chair, and sat on the floor beside it, the same way Barbara had once sat on the floor beneath Ha-eun's window, small and harmless, and not asking for anything. I'll sit here for a while, Ha-eun said. If that's okay. That's okay, baby. I won't talk if you don't want to talk. You can talk. Okay. Ha-eun settled Kami in her lap. Did I tell you about the girl at school, So-yeon? She tried to tell me that my facts about stars were wrong, and I had to explain to her that I got them from a book and books are more right than opinions. And she said opinions can be right too. And I said yes, but not about stars specifically. And then we looked it up, and I was right, but she's still my best friend, because she's the only one who argues back. And so Ha-eun talked, the way Barbara had once talked for 2 of them, filling the silence with kindness without asking for anything back. And Grandma Carter sat in the good chair by the sunny window, and listened, and breathed, and stayed. Later, much later, after Ha-eun had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Grandma Carter cried for the first time since the diagnosis. Not from fear, from the peculiar, overwhelming grace of being loved by people she hadn't known existed 18 months ago, in a way she hadn't expected and couldn't have planned for and would not. She decided then and there, miss a single day of. She cried for about 4 minutes. Then she blew her nose and picked up her Bible and said out loud to the empty sunny room, Okay, Lord, I hear you. She stayed. The letter arrived the following week. It came in a box that had been in a storage unit in Atlanta, in the name of a company Barbara didn't recognize, and it arrived with a note in Do-hyun's handwriting that said only, My father's estate. These were in it. The one on top is addressed to Atlanta. It took me 2 days to understand why. Barbara opened the box. At the top was an envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed. The address on the front was a street in Atlanta that Barbara recognized because she had grown up 2 blocks from it. The name on the envelope was not hers. It was her grandmother's. Her grandmother's name, in a handwriting Barbara had never seen, on an envelope that had been in a dead crime lord's estate for, she checked the postmark, 26 years. It had never been sent. She brought it to Grandma Carter. Grandma Carter looked at the envelope for a long time. Open it, Barbara said. I know what it says, Grandma Carter said softly. Barbara sat down. 1998, Grandma Carter said. You were 9. I was working double shifts at the hospital. A young Korean man came into the ER. He was in trouble. Not medical trouble. The kind of trouble that comes from being in the wrong business and finding out the wrong people knew where you were. She folded her hands in her lap. The orderly wanted to turn him away, say he wasn't sick enough for a bed. But he was scared, that boy. Scared in the way young men get scared when they've done something they can't undo and they don't know who to be anymore. Barbara was very still. I gave him a bed, Grandma said. Kept him for 2 days. Told the people looking for him he'd already been discharged. Fed him. Prayed with him. Whether he understood it or not. A pause. He didn't speak much English. I didn't speak any Korean. But he knew what I was doing. And when he left, when it was safe, he took my hand and said something I didn't understand. And bowed. So deep, baby. Like I'd given him the world. The sunflower garden was outside the window. Ha-eun's piano, badly played, floated up from below. He was 22, Grandma Carter said. I found out later, much later, who he was. I put it together from things you'd said, from an old photograph Denise found. And I knew who he was. She looked at the envelope. His father must have found out somehow, must have written this, meant to send it and then, never did, Barbara said, never did. Grandma Carter opened the envelope, read it slowly, moving her lips slightly, the way she read things that mattered. Then she passed it to Barbara. It was in Korean. At the bottom, someone, not the writer, a translator, later, had added 3 lines in English. She fed my son when he was hungry. She hid my son when he was hunted. She prayed over him in a language he didn't understand, and somehow he felt it anyway. This debt is not money. I don't know how to repay it. I am writing this down so that it exists somewhere, because some things must be written down or they disappear. Kang Sung-jin, 1998. Barbara read it twice. She thought about a broke girl from Atlanta crossing an ocean, because an agency lady slid an address across a desk. She thought about a gate that looked built to keep something in. She thought about the most feared man in Seoul and his daughter who hadn't spoken in 2 years, and a box of second-hand watercolors. She thought, it was never random. She found Do-hyun in the study. She handed him the letter without speaking. He read it. Read the English lines at the bottom. Read them again. He was quiet for so long that Barbara sat down in the chair across from him and waited. She hid him, he said finally. My father told me once, when I was very young, that a woman in an American hospital had saved his life during a trip that went wrong. He never told me her name. He never told me the city. His voice was very controlled, which meant the thing under it was not. He said, there are debts you can never repay, because the person doesn't know they're owed. Barbara looked at her husband who had hired a nanny from Atlanta, because nobody else would take the job. Her husband whose father had been saved by a woman from Atlanta 26 years ago. Do-hyun, she said. I know, he said. I know. She reached across the desk the way her grandmother had reached across a kitchen table, the way she had reached across a counter at 3 a.m., the warm brown hand finding the cold one. It was never random, she said. He looked at her hand, looked up, and the expression on his face. This man who had spent 2 years braced against the world, who had learned slowly and painfully to let the world back in, was something she'd never quite seen on him before. It was wonder. Pure, unguarded, 20 years of grief-lifting wonder. No, he said. It wasn't. The baby came in March. On a Tuesday, which was an ordinary day, which was exactly right. Because the most important things, Barbara had learned, tend to arrive on ordinary days. They named him Sung, Do-hyun's choice, quietly made, for a father who never sent a letter, but who had written something down because he knew that some things must be written down or they disappear. Barbara liked the name. It was short and warm and it fit. His full name was Kang Sung James Carter, because Grandma Carter's late husband had been James, and because Ha-eun had insisted on something American in there for balance, and because in this family, balance was achieved through negotiation, and Ha-eun was very good at it. Ha-eun held him first, after Barbara, before Do-hyun. Per the agreement, she held him like he was made of light, careful and certain at the same time, Kokomi tucked under one arm, the baby in the other, looking down at him with an expression so serious and so full, it made every adult in the room either cry or nearly cry. Madame O did not cry. She went to make tea. This was her method. Hi, Ha-eun said to him, very softly. I'm your Nuna, your big sister. I've been practicing. She looked up at Barbara. He knows me, right? He can tell it's me? He can hear your voice, Barbara said. He's been hearing it for months. Ha-eun looked back down at Sung. I read to him, she told him seriously. All the time, including the ones where I did the voices. So you know me already. You just don't know you know me yet. She adjusted her grip very slightly. I made a list for how things work. I'll tell you when you're bigger. The main rule is be kind and be smart. But if you have to choose, choose kind. Oma says that. It's the right answer. Do-hyun stood behind Barbara with his hands on her shoulders and his face doing the complicated thing it did when something was too big for the walls he used to keep it in. Denise was crying without any attempt at hiding it, which was just Denise being Denise. And Grandma Carter, 3 months into treatment, responding better than the numbers had dared to predict, sitting in the chair they'd brought into the room because she was not missing this, watched her great-grandchild be held by a 6-year-old Korean girl who had once decided the world wasn't worth speaking to, and she said very quietly, to no one in particular, now that's something. Ha-eun passed Sung to Do-hyun. Do-hyun received him with both hands, the way you receive something you have been waiting for, without knowing you were waiting. The baby was impossibly small. The man holding him had once built a fortress around his grief, and lived inside it for 2 years. Sung blinked up at him. Do-hyun said nothing for a long time, then, hi. That was all. Just, hi. The man who had made other men disappear with 3 quiet words, reduced to 1, by 7 pounds of new life looking up at him with eyes that were his. Ha-eun grabbed Barbara's hand. Barbara grabbed Grandma Carter's. Denise grabbed Madame O's, because Madame O was the only hand available, and Madame O endured this with enormous dignity and did not pull away. They stood there, the assembled, accidental, deeply improbable family, in the ordinary light of a Tuesday in March, above a sunflower garden that used to grow only grief. Later, much later, when the baby was asleep and Ha-eun was finally asleep too, she'd lasted until 11 on sheer willpower, and the house had settled into its nighttime sounds. Barbara stood on the terrace. Do-hyun came to stand beside her. The city below was lit and distant, and not theirs anymore, which was exactly correct. Sung, she said. For your father. He was not, Do-hyun said slowly, a good man, in many of the ways that matter. A pause. But he wrote something down because he knew it should exist. That part. He looked at the city. That part was good. The whole thing was good, Barbara said. The orderly wanted to turn him away. Your father, 22, scared, in trouble he'd made himself, walked into a hospital in Atlanta, and found a woman who had every reason not to bother. And she bothered anyway. She tucked her arm through his. That's the whole story. Everything after is just the story finding its way home. Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. Then you're getting very philosophical. It's very late. I just had a baby. I'm allowed. Fair. Also, I'm cold. I know. He put his arm around her. Come inside. In a minute. She looked at the garden below them, at the lit window of Ha-eun's room, where Ha-eun was finally asleep with Kokomi, and a baby monitor turned to Sung's room so she could hear him. Do-hyun. Do you think Ha-eun will actually sing? At church? On Sunday? A pause. She will definitely sing, he said, loudly, and possibly incorrectly. And you? A longer pause. I told your grandmother I would sing. I know. Barbara looked up at him. I just wanted to hear you say it. And Kang Do-hyun, who had built an empire, lost a wife, nearly lost a daughter, torn down a gate, made a deal over a handshake with a 79-year-old churchwoman, and found his way through all of it to a Tuesday in March, on a terrace over a sunflower garden, said, I will sing. Badly, probably. Doesn't matter, Barbara said. No, he agreed. It doesn't. They went inside. She came for the money. She found a daughter. She saved a grandmother. She built a whole world from a box of second-hand watercolors and a refusal to run. And in a city that once ran on fear, in a house that once ran on silence, in rooms that once held only lilies, there is a 6-year-old with opinions about everything, reading to her baby brother, in a voice that carries every character perfectly. Kokomi, watching from the pillow. There is a grandmother in a sunny room writing letters to her church in Atlanta, about what it looks like when God is being extra, and it looks like a sunflower garden and a Korean man learning to sing. There is a woman who runs a household like a Swiss watch, sitting at a kitchen table playing cards with a 79-year-old Southern Baptist, who taught her the correct way to do a hospital corner, and they are arguing about it still, and neither of them is leaving. And there is a man who once sat at the head of a very different kind of table, standing in a doorway watching all of it, wearing a watch that used to say power and now just says time, with a baby against his chest, and an expression that has no name yet in the language he was born speaking. He's working on it. He has time. Before you go, 3 things. 1. If this story hit you somewhere real, tap like. Let's get this to every person who needed a story about what family actually looks like when it's made on purpose. 2. Comments. What was the moment that got you? Was it Ha-eun's list? Grandma and Madame O and the cornbread? The letter? The letter? Tell me. I read every single one. 3. Subscribe and hit the mine. Because Ha-eun has already started teaching Sung about stars, and she has opinions about his first word. And Madame O has decided she has thoughts about the nursery decor. Bring tissues. And maybe snacks. Flamin' hot if you're brave. I'll see you in Seoul.